Man's relation to God in worship. Herod's temple has been so often pictured and described that we need not dwell upon it. Edersheim's temple and its services gives a scholarly and complete account of it. This grandest of all the three temples reared at Jerusalem, the one honored by our Lord's presence, was finally completed in AD 65, the year before the war with Rome broke out. 5 years later, not one stone was left on another. Matthew 24, 1 and 2. Henceforth, realizing the teaching of Malachi 1:11 and John 4:24, we turn to the living temple of the future, which had Christ for its cornerstone and for its foundation the apostles, Ephesians 2:20, that first company of believers which has grown up into the great Christendom of today and will, we trust, grow into the greater Christendom of tomorrow. Christ began to form his church when he gathered 5 disciples about him by Jordan, John 1. He first named it after Peter's confession of the central truth upon which it was to be founded, Matthew 16. Its birthday and the day it first found itself face to face with the world was the day of Pentecost, AD 30. That transformed peasants into the heroic preachers and confessors who enlightened the world. The transient gift of tongues was the symbol of a permanent and far greater gift of spiritual power on the day which began the last phase of God's dealings with men. The day when he followed up the promise to Abraham and the law of Moses, the tabernacle and temple where dwelt as visible emblem of his presence the Shekinah, and the tabernacling in a mortal body of his own Son among men by sending his Spirit to dwell in men. John 14:17. More than this God could not give. Nearer than this he could not be, says Farrer. And now the teaching of Christ with its 2 new keynotes, correlatives of each other, the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of men, was to be practically illustrated. The political comprehension of mankind in one great empire would give way to a moral federation of mankind through a common faith. The first 2 stages of the history of that church, which placed men in a new relation to each other, were 1, the Hebrew period, when it consisted of Jews of Palestine speaking Aramaic, and probably reckoned as only one more synagogue in a city, which already had 480. 2, the Hellenistic period, when it included Jews of the dispersion speaking Greek. We begin next term by considering the steps that led to the formation of a Gentile church. Here, it only remains for us to show that Christ placed men in a new relation, not merely to each other, but to God. He taught that religion does not depend upon external precepts, but upon surrender of the will to God. That good acts have no value apart from good motives. That hatred, not violence, is the essence of murder. That God looks at the sinful thought rather than the criminal deed. He did more than teach. Human sin, a far more heinous thing than men had hitherto thought it, is taken away once and forever by the sinless one, John 1:29, who laid down his life for men. Yea, once Emmanuel's orphaned cry his universe hath shaken. It went up echoless, my God, I am forsaken. It went up from the Holy's lips amid his lost creation. That of the lost, no son should use those words of desolation. E.B. Browning.